Welcome to CXWise, where we share wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise from the world of customer experience. I am your host, Nathan Bennett, and you're about to hear real-world experiences and practical advice that will elevate your CX game, no matter your title and no matter your industry. So, without further ado, let's get wise. My guest today is a self-described investigator, agitator, and instigator of better outcomes in the customer experience field. He's got over 25 years of experience in building customer-centric organizations, and has collaborated with a remarkable range of industry giants like Apple and KFC, just to name a few. He's also the author of 3 best-selling books, How to Wow, Punk CX, and Punk XL, which challenge conventional wisdom in the customer experience field. And when he takes a break from consulting, he writes for Forbes, he hosts the Punk CX podcast, and where does he find the time to rock climb? Welcome to CXWise, Adrian Swinscoe. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Nate. Thank you very much. Interesting that you picked 2 brands. One was about computers and or phones, and then about fried chicken. Maybe that says a lot about you, perhaps.
What more is life? I mean, don't I look like I've consumed a lot of KFC in my day?
No comment.
Fair enough.
No comment.
From an instigator, from a self-described instigator. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is why you describe yourself with those 3 words: investigator, agitator, and instigator of better outcomes. Can you unpack those 3 words and how do they apply to you and what you do?
Yeah. I've been using those 3 words for a little while now, and I do it because I think they're more useful than describing yourself as a consultant. And it sort of explains some of the things that I do. So I'm an investigator in that I do a lot of research and writing and podcasting and talk to people and all these different sort of things around what it takes to build organizations that deliver better outcomes for the people. And so I've written books about it. So I'm investigating. I'm looking for clues, as it were. I'm not looking for the answer. I'm just looking for clues in terms of how to produce and drive these better outcomes, like better customer, better employee, and better business outcomes. That's sort of the holy trinity, or the trifecta that we're all trying to push towards. The agitator is sort of linked to that because it's almost like the output of some of that research in terms of the writing, the sort of speaking of the workshops or doing things like this. I'm sort of trying to agitate and advocate for, because it's about trying to create change in people's kind of like minds and also the way that they do things. And the instigation part is where you take an active hand in trying to deliver some of these outcomes. And that could be through talking or workshops, or partnering with different sort of people, or actually getting asked to get involved in projects where somebody has a problem, a challenge, and they would like some help sort of navigating that and finding an answer to that. And so I hope that those words are useful. Nobody has told me so far that has heard that, has told me that they think I'm talking out my arse. And maybe they haven't told me that because they haven't had plucked up enough courage to tell me that. But right now, that jacket fits and I'm wearing it, and I might change it at some point in the future.
I know you've told this story a number of times, but there might be a listener out there who has not heard the origin of Punk CX.
Right.
And I anytime there's a pint involved, I want to hear the story.
Yeah. So the backstory to Punk CX is that this was back in 2018. And I was hanging out with a friend of mine called Oshin Lunny. We were talking about the state of the service and experience space. And I was just getting a little bit sort of agitated about it, and I sort of almost just kind of blurted out. I was frustrated about the lack of, despite all the enthusiasm and activity and investment in the space, I was frustrated at the lack of sort of distinct improvement in these kind of customer outcomes. And I sort of blurted out, I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk to try and move the needle. I'm a fan of punk music, and I was thinking about the origin of it. And punk music exploded out the back of effectively progressive rock in the 1970s. And it struck me that evolution, that there were some similarities between some of the characteristics of progressive rock and what was currently happening in the experience sort of space. Because my hypothesis is that the experience space is becoming overly codified, certified, benchmarked, frameworked, metriced, blah, blah, blah. And it's in danger of losing sight of its actual real constituents and actually more interested in itself and its own virtuosity and its own methods and its own talk and all these different things. And I was a bit like, well, that feels a bit like progressive rock. Therefore, what would a punk version look like? And so I thought, well, actually, there's something in there, I think. And then so I started to pull together a bunch of ideas about what that one might look like. And then that formed into a book, actually, and a book that looks like this.
Love it.
And it actually it's like an art project, a thought project, art project, because actually the book, I was thinking about the whole idea of the book, and I thought about, well, we don't need, and the world doesn't need another 50,000 words of black ink on white paper, and that wouldn't be very punk either.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, what can we do? Punk was inspired by a lot of these very short, pithy sort of songs that are in an album. And I thought, why don't we do something like that? Something that is a nod to some of the graphics and the art or the punk movement, but also the style of the music. And so the book is full color, and it's like a fanzine, and it has tracks rather than chapters, and it's basically a series of ideas that are meant to provoke,
agitate,
and make you think.
You know, I'm reminded. I'm probably going to butcher this quote, so forgive me. When you talk about, are you an artist or are you just filling in the colors?
Yeah, are you an artist or are you just coloring in?
Yeah, just coloring in. What does artistry in the customer experience space look like?
So the quote that you refer to is the title of the first, if you like, track in the Punk CX book. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to that whole idea that many people are approaching some of these experience kind of problems in a very formulaic, standardized sort of way. So in many ways, you've got all these people doing the same thing, expecting different results. And it felt like, to me, that feels a bit like, well, it's just like painting by numbers. Mm-hmm. And so, but if you paint by numbers, as long as you color in within the lines, you might get a nice picture, but you're not going to get art, right? It's not going to leap off the page. It's not going to connect with you. It's not going to have necessarily a nuance about it that's going to captivate or capture or necessarily be relevant to you. You know, the thing about, probably all work for different brands, and all these different brands hopefully have different values, different personalities, different styles, different things that they hold important. Our job as human beings is to try and translate those things into what we promise and then what we deliver to customers.
Right.
And that translation process is the art part. And it's only that we can do that because we interpret that and then we try and think about how do we do that to give that meaning for our customers, for both ourselves and our customers.
You cautioned when we talk about, everybody's sort of doing the same thing, thinking it's innovative. I recently heard you say regarding AI's impact on CX, mm-hmm. to embrace the opportunity, but don't get carried away by the hype. Mm-hmm. So how is AI currently redefining customer experiences today? And what are your cautions for brands and CX leaders to not get carried away?
Blimey, what a big question. I should first say that some of the advancements in technology, particularly digital tools, but all the kind of systems that power them, up to and including sort of artificial intelligence, the generative AI or predictive analytics or whatever it might be, and all the things that are coming forth like agentic AI and knowledge graphs and all these other kind of land graphs and all that other sort of like good stuff that's coming down the pipe. The thing that we need to remember is they're only but tools, and they're not solutions in and of themselves. If we're going to we roll back to, say, 2020, when we were in the midst of the pandemic and everybody was like, wow, massive shift to digital, and everybody decided they had to have a chatbot. And most times people plug those chatbots in and thought, well, we're done. It's a plug and play thing. And most of them are horrible. An artist isn't defined by what tools they have. It's about how they conceive of something and how they use the tools to achieve that, or to bring that vision to pass. And I think we need to remember that, because otherwise we end up getting to this point where we end up we get led by the technology rather than us leading it and thinking about what tools we need to pull out of the toolbox in order to solve the problem. Now, so I think that's the real kind of danger, is that we end up getting led by the technology. But if we get led by the technology, I believe that we end up losing sight of, or we're in danger of losing sight of, is how do we establish the human connection? How do we pay attention to people and what they want, and then deliver to them what matters? Because without a doubt, the technology is incredible, and it's evolving so fast, it's mind-boggling. But there's all sorts of concerns about that. I mean, just take, within that whole technological kind of mix, so we think about the idea of personalization, right? Personalization is widely held to be important, whether you ask customers or you ask kind of brands. Customers want it, brands want to deliver it. And it's been like that for years. But the problem for years also, customers have, once they've said that, they've also said, we've got concerns about how much data is being collected by brands in order to deliver that. And they have been saying this for years, but brands haven't been listening. And so the personalization is at odds. Oof. They've got different understandings of what personalization means. Then you add artificial intelligence into the mix, which then requires lots of data to power it, whilst consumers were initially enthused by the possibilities of AI. Recent research is starting to suggest that they're becoming increasingly wary of it, particularly in that whole brand interaction sort of like space. So I think the thing that's important is that the brands need to pay attention to some of the concerns that consumers have, because there's a real potential trust deficit opening up. And if they don't attend to it, then the people that are willing to attend to that will then start really showing up in the market and differentiating themselves by actually attending to that. And that could be enough for people to go, well, if it's not you and you're not listening to me, I'm off over here. Because we know that consumers are becoming increasingly intolerant and skittish about poor experiences. And poor experiences doesn't mean something that's calamitous. It could be like you just made it too hard, or you've been a bit too creepy in your marketing, or you've not basically paid attention to me, or respected my wishes and my preferences and all this stuff. You haven't built that foundation of trust, and so I'm off. And I think that's the thing, is we need to make sure that we don't, with all this technological rapid evolution, that we don't lose sight of what's important to customers.
It brings to mind that your chat with Paul Adams about how Intercom is trying to cut through the noise in AI and customer service space. Did you pull any interesting insights from that chat relevant to that?
The really interesting things I wanted to talk to Paul about was there was a piece of Gartner research that was released in about August of this year. And it said that 73% of customers want to use self-service tools. They're like going, yeah, we're fine. We want to find the solutions for ourselves, and we're happy to do that. It's on our phone or computers or whatever. The problem is, I think it was 14% of them had been able to resolve their query through the use of those tools, whether it's chatbots or search or whatever it might be, knowledge bases and things. And that number rose to about 32% for very, very simple queries. And I was fascinated by that. I was a bit like, well, that basically says that some of the technology that's out there is just rubbish.
Yeah.
Now, might not be rubbish in terms of the actual technology of itself, but how it's configured and how it's customized and how it's kind of made relevant for a particular brand instance, it's just obviously not working according to Gartner's research. And I wanted to understand what Intercom had done in order to try and make things better. And they've done a bunch of different things. One is they've used some of the best in class large language models to power their things. They've built a very specific customer service focused LLM to go on top of that. But the most important thing, and this is the point of failure in many of these instances, is that they worked very hard at understanding the customer's question at the initial point, because that is a key point of failure. We assume that people ask questions in simple ways that's easy to understand, and you go, how do you find this, and et cetera, et cetera. We all do it in a reasonably homogenous way. No, we don't. Human beings are weird, right? One person told me once there was a bank that was doing a survey, surveying some of its data, trying to find out, well, how many different ways they come up with for asking basically what's the balance of my account. You know how many different variations they came up with?
Jeez, I don't know.
Tell me. Guess.
30.
200.
Get out of here.
200 subtle variations to get to the same outcome.
Good God.
So if you think about that level of variety, if you don't get it right, then the input sort of thing is, it's like, if you don't work on that understanding to really kind of get clear on what a customer is looking for, then you're inputting kind of like error into the process. And so that's the really interesting thing they've done is they've worked really hard on going, we need to work hard on understanding the question. If we understand the question, then we know exactly what we want to do, and everything else will kick into place. And
the question is the problem, right? I mean,
yeah. And if you don't understand the question, then it's a bit like any other kind of conversation. You ask me a question, and I'm a bit like, and I don't really listen and try and understand it. I basically tell you what I want to what I want to tell you, regardless of what you're asking. And you're like, what now? And then you go, that's not what I asked. And you're like, and then we're back and forth. And you're like going, that's hard work, right? What they're doing is they're just doubling down on the listening and trying to really understand kind of very closely what is being asked of them, so that they know exactly what needs to be delivered in order to solve that query.
Let's speak to our CIOs, our CTOs out there, our decision makers who are buying technology and trying to implement it into their contact center space as well. I know you recently worked with Zoom and you put together a report about, is your contact center future ready? Can you give us a couple of insights into that report and questions that we should be asking ourselves if we're those decision makers to really understand, is our contact center in fact future ready to provide these excellent customer experiences?
Despite all of what I said around some of these front-end digital sort of tools, the self-service tools, is they will get better. So we will get better at learning about them, we'll get better at implementing them, and the technology itself will get better. And over time, there'll be a natural evolution that, all of the promises, or many of the promises that have been made by some of the analyst firms, that 50, 60, 70% of simple inquiries will be able to be handled by some of these self-service sort of tools. I think we'll face a situation where most of the queries that are coming into a contact center or a service desk or a help desk, whatever it might be, will be increasingly complicated or urgent, complex kind of issues. Now, the problem is most of that, or much of that knowledge, or the knowledge that is required to solve those questions, or the expertise that is required to solve those kind of questions, doesn't sit on the front line. Much of that will sit in the back office or the middle office or in other systems or other teams or whatever it might be. And that will kind of change over time as we tend to as we capture that knowledge, we'll be able to codify much, much more of it. So I guess my question would be for CIOs is that there's two things. One is like, make sure your self-service tools are fit for purpose. Make sure that you understand people's queries. Make sure that you're making it easy for people to answer some of the simple kind of questions. But when things are getting more complicated and the people have to reach out for live help, ask yourself this: how connected are your front lines to the rest of your organization? Like, for example, I've told a story before where I've said, imagine there's a time where, Nate, you had a problem and you've called in, and you call up and I pick up the phone and go, "Hi Nate, thanks for calling. How can I help you today?" And you go, blah, blah, blah. You tell me your kind of problem, and you go, "I can see from what you've plugged into our system and kind of where you've come, what you've been looking at on the kind of website based on that, our data mapping and things, that you've tried to do that. Is that right?" "Yes." "Fine. Okay, here's that. So I've understood the nature of the problem." It says that, and then you go, maybe, and I'm helped by my system, which says, it sounds like Nate's problem is exactly like what Joanne was talking to you about last week. And we got Tracy in X team to help kind of Joe out. Let me kind of like, and guess what? Tracy is available right now to solve kind of Nate's problem, because I can see that on the system. So I can say to you in real time and go, "Nate, it sounds like your problem is just like the problem that one of our customers called Joanne came to us with last week, and my colleague Tracy was able to help them just like that. I can see that Tracy's available right now. Let me loop Tracy into the conversation to see if she can help you." I messaged Tracy, "Are you free to take a call?" She goes, "Yes." So I bring Tracy into the call. Tracy, meet Nate. Nate, meet Tracy. Tracy, remember that problem that you saw for Joanne? I think Nate's got the same sort of thing. Can you kind of like help him? And she's like, "Oh yeah, brilliant. That's fine." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to just back out into the background. So I'll be here just to do wrap up when you're finished. So Nate, I'll leave you with kind of Tracy. I'm there. I go off and do something else while you're finishing." I get notified that the conversation is wrapped up. I jump back in and it's like, "Nate, how was that?" You go there. Basically, Tracy was like fantastic. I go, "Okay. Anything else I can help you with? And anything else? What else is going on, etc., etc." "No, you're fine." "Great, brilliant. Thanks very much. Have a great day." Or you could even go in further with that, and you go, before you go, we are really interested in and keen to improve our experience on an ongoing basis. I wonder, rather than sending you a survey, can I ask you a couple of just questions over the phone that so that it's going to help us understand what a good and personalized experience looks like for you? And you're like, "Going, sure, just a couple of questions." So I ask you these kind of like structured kind of questions. The technology understands what I'm kind of doing and then parses out the information while I'm talking to you, because it's listening to your responses, and it takes out all the the things and feeds it right back into our system of record or our decisioning engine. And I go, "That's really," and then I go, "That's it?" And you go, "That's it? That's all you want to know?" I went like, "Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you very much." You go, "That was easy. Fine. Great. Anything else?" "No, thank you very much. Have a great day." We can do all of those things now.
And should be, yeah? I mean, you're talking about
it's putting something like that together. It's not easy. But in broad terms, all the blocks are there. That's sort of within reach. And if I was to say to you, for a complex problem, where you're calling up and you got that type of service, how would that be?
I'd love that.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, we need to be informed by the technology, and so this is for the CIOs and stuff, is like the art of the possible, of that type of possible, is all there. What we need to do is we need to be getting involved in describing the vision of what it is we want to try and deliver, and then to think about what are the the phases we need to get to in order to be able to achieve that. What's the target state architecture that we need to put in place that's going to enable sort of that? Where are the gaps between where we are now and where we need to be in order to be able to deliver that? I don't think we spend enough time using our imagination and creativity about how we want to solve problems for people, and then thinking about what sort of tools we're going to need. Because what we end up doing is we end up doing back to front. We're having things back to front. We buy technology, fill it full of data, and then get the experience that we get, rather than doing it the other way around, where we're going, let's imagine what we could do. And then let's think about what data do we need to actually deliver that, and therefore then what sort of tools do we need to power that.
Well, you just answered like 3 of my questions that I was going to ask you, and so I appreciate that response. I was going to ask you too, and maybe it's a lack of vision, but what is sort of some of the biggest challenges you see the CIOs of the world facing when it comes to improving customer experience along those lines? Is it that they're lacking that vision of like what they want it to look like because the tools are already there? Or is it a lack of imagination?
I think it's a lack of a vision. I think it's the real Achilles heel in many brands' propositions. And the Achilles heel is that they say they have a vision for what they want to deliver, but they don't. Not when you really interrogate it. And, they say that you've got this series of buzzwords or this big old statement. But actually, when you think about that, when you really drill in and interrogate it, you go, well, what does that actually mean? And what does it mean for different types of customers across different points of the journey? What does it mean for your employees to deliver against these things across the different parts of the journey? What's the human and tech kind of balance? Where are you now and where do you want to be? And how is all of that connected to your business objectives? Does it help you become more attractive? Does it help you convert interest into kind of custom? Does it help your customers buy more easily or allow you to make quicker sales? Does it drive kind of loyalty and repeat purchase? Does it reduce your cost to serve? Those 5 big levers that are fundamental to most enterprises, most businesses. If you can connect all the stuff that you're doing to one or more of those things, then you will deliver relevance and commercial returns and ROI to everything you need to do.
I remember you saying in Punk CX, again, forgive me if I don't get the quote right, but if you want to hire the sort of people who are going to deliver standout experience for your customers, how creative are you being? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the creativity that's required to build that sort of team? What should we be looking for when we're putting our experience teams together?
We should make sure the one thing that we should definitely do is that we should make sure that our experience teams don't look like us, and make sure that they look like our customers, which means that they're going to come in all sorts of shapes and sizes,
right?
And variations and all of that sort of stuff. And I think you need to do that so you'll be able to sort of connect and have that diversity of perspective and opinion and experience and all those different sort of things. And we need to represent our customers if we're going to do a good job for them. So I think that's kind of one thing. The other thing I would say is that some of the most successful people in this sort of space are the ones that focus on the outcomes and are now willing to do their own thing. I always characterize it as that, you should be gathering your data and using the data as much as possible, because data will inform you. But data will only take you so far, because it won't give you the rich picture, as it were, behind the data. And I think sometimes you have to go beyond that and go, because data informs you, but stories will move us. Yeah. And that last one is linked to this old sort of Toyota idea. Like what comes from Toyota, which talks about going to the Gemba, which is a Japanese expression, which means going to the real place. the place where things happen, where value is created or the real work is done. So there, and Toyota used to that, the way that manifested itself in Toyota's terms was that the managers used to go and walk around and observe the factory floor. More students, not to tell people what to do, but to learn, to listen and to understand, and to be there to try and solve problems. But how that would work in an experience sense is almost like, how do you get yourself to bring yourself closer to customers or to the people that are serving customers? And there's two people that I know of that do this in very, very different ways. One is a lady called Manisha Busal that I had on the podcast, and she was VP of Customer Experience and Operations at JDID across in, so Jingdong.com across in Indonesia. Formerly, she's no longer there. But one of the things that she did was that she would on her own time, she would go and hang out with people in the contact center, listen to calls. She'd go and hang out in the warehouse. This is an e-commerce operation. She'd go and hang out in the warehouse and see how they did things. She'd even jump in to logistic lorries and go on a ride along to see them delivering parcels. She would go and mystery shop her own. She would mystery shop her competitors and then her own operation, just to compare that sort of thing. That's sort of the level of commitment she wanted to get closer to the experience that her customers had and what mattered. And then that was her way of making the difference. And then there was somebody else who's way, way more radical. And it's a guy called Martin Gribner that I spoke to years ago. And his pitch to people that were employing him is like, I divide my time in 3 ways. He says, I'm going to spend a third of my time hanging out with the people that deal with customers. Because I want to know kind of what about customers. I want to kind of understand the people that are helping customers. I'll just see, that's why I understand the kind of problems. He said, I'm going to spend the next third of my time just wondering about the organization, getting to know people. Because we should not forget that an organization is an organism. It's organic rather than mechanistic. And we have to understand the moving parts of it and how it operates. Because it's a machine, an organic machine. And he says, I'll spend the last third of my kind of time doing my, in inverted commas, proper job. The thing that says that's on your job description. And he said, and if you don't like it, don't hire me.
I want to take a second before we get to our last question. For our listeners, we love to continue to spread your wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise, Adrian, even beyond this podcast. So for our listeners out there, when you post one of the key takeaways from this episode on your social media and tag it #CXWise, we will send you a copy of Adrian's book, Punk CX on Us, because it is it ought to be out there in more hands. It is a bestseller. If you don't already have it, you must go get it. But we will send you a copy of that if you do post with the #CXWise, and we'll put that really, really great copy in your hand. Adrian, let's get our crystal balls out for the year 2025. There's a lot of things that we could talk about, but let's say, what do you think will be the top customer experience priorities or trends for brands in 2025?
I think that the whole generative AI dragon has been unleashed, and it's just going to continue to grow and evolve and create havoc and morph and evolve. And in a good way, I think people will try and wrestle it to the ground and try and figure out how to harness some of its possibility and its horsepower. And we need to start paying attention to things that our customers have been saying to us, and things they've been saying to us for years. And we need to double down on being brilliant at the basics. There's going to come a point where customers are going to start to switch off.
And that trust deficit just becomes too much, too heavy, too wide.
And if you don't attend to it, then it's just a matter of time that your competitor
somebody else will,
because they'll see the signals and they'll go, hang on, we need to do that. And that might be a case of we need to go slower in order to go further. When it comes to building trust, I think that might be a viable strategy.
Oh, man. Adrian, you have been so generous with your time. There are a lot of other things that I wanted to get to that we didn't have time, but I will say you have made us all a lot CX wiser today. I really appreciate your work, your expertise in the field, your generosity with your time, and thank you so much. And I hope you come back and see us. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.